listeners. And
formally binned in a vote the government is expected to win easily, in part because Labour support it. But then, of course, it gets tricky. The rest of the mini-budget measures, they do not support Labour, and they know that there are Conservative backbenchers who also don't support them and regard Liz Truss with disdain, to put it mildly. Also, in the background, there are warnings that the government is having to cut spending, but plenty of places where people are calling for spending to be increased. We just heard one of them, didn't we, from Jamie Oliver, saying free school meals for everyone on universal credit would be a good idea. Some Tory MPs agree with him. I asked Therese Coffey, the Health and Social Care Secretary, whether she did.
Well, I know this has been suggested in the past. In my previous role, Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, I'm aware that people could be earning over £40,000 and still be on universal credit. I think it's important support is targeted. I'm not aware of any further changes that are being proposed to what happens today.
Right, so it sounds as if you're pretty plain that you do not support it. You don't think it's a good idea. You're saying to Jamie Oliver and others, no.
It's a matter for the Secretary of State for Education, who has the responsibility for this policy area. I'm just flagging that people in universal credit, given it's a dynamic in-work and out-of-work benefit, can actually be earning a considerable amount of money, which I think other taxpayers may be surprised to learn that somebody on £40,000 would all of a sudden become eligible for free school meals. But, you know, that's I'm not aware of any change in policy that the Department for Education is intending to make.
Can we turn to another big public health campaign? That's the obesity campaign, which previously we were told was going to be rolled out, the end of 2-for-1 offers and all the rest of it. Have you now binned that?
Well, we've introduced some regulations to delay the introduction of aspects like the buy one, get one free offers. We're continuing with some other aspects, including, of course, aspects of menu labelling. But I think the Prime Minister's been very clear in wanting to make sure that we have a really positive approach to how we help on these longer term matters, instead of telling people exactly what they can do with their money and what they can or cannot buy in a supermarket. So it's about being a more positive rather than mandating what we can't do.
Except that it does have an impact on the nation's health, doesn't it? And on the nation's expenditure on health.
Well, the aspects that I've seen, particularly on buy one, get one free, it makes even what analysis I've seen, marginal difference. But I think it's very important recognising the cost of living challenge many families are facing, although we've now been able to give massive support to households, building on the £37 billion that was already being distributed across the country, either through reduced energy bills or support to the lowest income. Of course, the Prime Minister and Chancellor have been very clear, as well as the Energy Secretary, on the additional support being given not just to households for assurances this winter and next winter, but also to businesses too.
And do you feel the same about the tobacco control plan, which again was part of the government's thinking in the early part of the year? Is that not anymore? You have a tobacco control plan, or you did. Britain going to be smoke-free by 2030. Lots of measures to bear down on smoking. Have they gone?
Well, Justin, my top priority are ABCD, ambulances, backlogs, care, doctors and dentists. That affects the majority of people in this country.
But is that control plan still in place?
As far as I'm aware, policies are in place. Some plans probably are, I think, are still in draft form.
Do you back it?
Justin, I'm here to backing the backlogs. That's the key thing that I'm focused on right now, ABCD, and that's what I'm sticking to.
Just going back to the free school meals, you mentioned that people on universal credit can be earning substantial sums, £40,000 or so, but actually the cut-off is low, isn't it, for when you get a free school meal? It's right back down to £7,500. Could that cut-off be raised?
Well, it's similar to that in Scotland. I think, again, it's really a matter for the Secretary of State for Education, who's responsible for the policy on free school meals.
But I'm just asking you whether you believe that £7,500 is the right cut-off. Is that something that you're willing to...
That's affect a net income, but as I say, this is really a matter for the Secretary of State for Education.
It's just that you mentioned £40,000, but actually £7,500 isn't so much, is it?
No, you're not comparing like for like, Justin, but that's why I think if this is a
why
thing
not?
You're not comparing like for like, but I think this is a matter that you should really take up with the Secretary of State for Education, who leads on policy on this
When you
today.
say I'm not comparing like for like, meaning what?
You're not comparing what the £7,000 threshold, which is, I say, very similar to that in Scotland. In fact, I think the threshold in England may be even higher. But you're not comparing the gross income that people have coming into their families with how the threshold gets calculated or assessed. So, as I say, it's a matter really for the Secretary of State for Education.
You're Deputy Prime Minister. Can I ask you finally a wider question? You've had a bruising first few weeks in office, this new Truss-led government. Are there lessons you've learned, and if so, what are they?
Well, I think I'm very conscious, as you say, this administration's been in place just over a month now, and of course many significant events have happened during that time. I think what the Prime Minister and Chancellor have been very clear about is that we do need to grow our economy and to unveil policies and start delivery plans on how we can make that happen.
But is that a lesson you've learned, that you should have said that right at the beginning?
Well, I think that was said. I'm very conscious that the Chancellor has now announced that on 31st of October he'll be setting out the medium-term fiscal plan to the country. The plan for growth was significantly not only about recognising the energy cost challenge that households and businesses had and addressing that with a comprehensive package, but also some of the other measures to trail about how we intend to get growth. And as more will be said on the 31st of October.
What some of your own supporters have been saying is that you're politically inept. William Hague in the Times today saying eventually you are going to have to uprate benefits in line with inflation and you're going to be dragged to it. And in the end, you'll get no credit for doing it because you'll be seen to be opposed to doing it. It's getting on a front foot in things like that. He says, and some backbenchers agree with him, are the things that will make a difference to this government. And if you don't do it, you'll fail.
Well, Justin, again, I would say that no decisions have been made, quite simply because...
Yes, but that's the point, isn't it?
No, it's not the point, Justin, as I'm about to explain.
Right.
The Secretary of State for Work and Pensions has to make a decision. That decision is always made in November based on information presented to the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. And I appreciate some of the machinery of government can be boring. People want decisions made tomorrow when actually the full facts aren't available to the Secretary of State.
But this is a matter of principle. That's the point, isn't it? You're talking about the mechanics, and I quite understand why you are, but what a lot of your backers say, your own supporters, is hang on a second, this is just principle. We should just say what our principles are, and that is that the poorest people in society should not be at risk from inflation.
Well, our principles are well set out. We'd already spent money to support people with the cost of living, particularly focused on the lowest income in society. As the Prime Minister said as consistently, we will help the vulnerable. But as I say, I appreciate at times the machinery of government can be boring, but no definitive statement can be made about changes to benefit rates. Otherwise, of course, we'll end up getting into all sorts of legal cases in a different way as well. So there is an element here about what we're trying to do to support people in that regard.
Therese Coffey, your phone is going off. At least I think it's your phone.
It's not Dr. Dre this time.
It's not Dr. Dre this time. You have a different ring for every interview. Therese Coffey, thank you very much.
OK, thank you. Bye-bye.
I think that alarm... So I've had enough of that. Now, moving on to the weather, which we need to hear from